Garland sits there today and just says over and over and over again that everything at the Department of Justice is fine. There's nothing for Americans to be worried about. There are no political considerations whatsoever, and that he's not even following the details of the David Weiss investigation into Hunter Biden and his business dealings because he's staying out of it, he says. And apparently not bothered at all by all of the many credible reports of corruption in that investigation, DOJ interference in that investigation. For more on this, I want to bring in the president of the Heritage Foundation and the host of the Kevin Roberts Show. Dr. Kevin Roberts joins us now. Sir, good to have you with us.
Vince, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
What do you make of this? Merrick Garland sits up there today and acts like everything's above board, and it is a deeply frustrating thing to watch.
Well, it is. I just look at it as an ordinary American and wonder how it is that not only Attorney General Garland, but so many members of this administration can sit before Congress with straight faces and lie through their teeth. The good news, the silver lining, is that the majority of the American people know that, and hopefully there will be consequences next year. The problem, though, is that this administration, in particular Garland, has inflicted a lot of damage upon us. And frankly, Vince, I think the country has largely moved to a position of entire distrust, not just of this administration, but of government in general. It's a very dangerous place for us to be.
Yeah, and there's a massive pile of evidence in front of us that demonstrates that the Justice Department is being used to advance the interests of one political party against the other. If you're looking at just the last week's news, you're seeing more January 6 prosecutions, including for people who weren't at the Capitol, a slap on the wrist for that guy Ray Epps, who actually was at the Capitol trying to incite people to go into the building. You have multiple grandmothers who were pro-lifers in their 70s who were just convicted, set to be sentenced to up to 11 years in prison for standing outside of abortion mills. You've got, some of the testimony today went over the fact that the Department of Justice targeted parents across the country for just going to school board meetings and speaking up. You had FBI field offices targeting Catholics for their views and saying that FBI agents should infiltrate churches. We've got something going on that's very out of control right now.
Well, we do, and it's not an overstatement when you listen to that eloquent but troubling litany of examples you just mentioned to say that we are living in George Orwell's America. I mean, it's honest to God, as I sit here talking to you, even though you and I cover this a lot and your audience certainly does, that this, in fact, is modern America. This is what we're confronting. And what we say here at Heritage, Vince, as you know, is that this battle for America, when you think about what the Department of Justice is doing and picking one side and imposing the entire power of the federal government on the other side, is no longer a battle of right versus left, of conservative versus liberal. It is us versus them. Common Americans against the American regime. I'm an early American historian, a proud American like you and all of your audience. I don't like saying that because it casts this beautiful republic in a bad light. But we got a narrow path ahead to take this country back. And we got to understand that what's going on with this hearing today with Garland, what Mayorkas says every time he's in front of a similar committee, is just lies. And they know that they can get away with it because most of the media are complicit with them. The only way we are going to fix this is for Congress to be even more aggressive than the committee members were today. They really ought to press their advantage because I'll just make one quick but important point. In the rules package that was passed in January as a result of Kevin McCarthy becoming Speaker, Congress disallowed any of the members of the administration from saying that under an existing investigation that they would not be able to talk about details about that. Congress said you would be held in contempt of Congress if you refuse to provide that information. That's exactly what Garland did today, and it would be great to see the chairman and the members of his committee press that advantage because they laid the groundwork for that.
Interesting. So that is actually in the rules that these Republicans agreed to, that there are consequences for stalling with Congress and not telling the American people what's actually happening. They should absolutely hold them accountable. And it's the only thing that works. I mean, remember when you had the FBI director refuse to hand over the FBI informant document, the FD 1023 form that detailed the Biden family bribery scheme in Ukraine. It was under a threat of contempt of Congress that he finally relented.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And obviously, some people can decide that they want to take the risk of that contempt of Congress charge. But that's a precise example of a little bit of the power that conservatives in Congress have that they don't use enough. Look, I'm grateful to the chairman and his committee for today's hearing, but the problem is you don't take the important news out of that comes out of that hearing and break into the American public at large. I mean, obviously, it's wonderful you talk about it and a few others until and unless you make it newsworthy. And what would be newsworthy is that committee holds him in contempt of Congress for trying to shroud himself under the language of an existing investigation. They knew. The leaders of the House Republicans in January knew that's what the Biden administration was going to do. It's really important that they go on offense here.
Right. And if you have an ongoing investigation that is as credibly accused of being corrupt as this one is, you can't, as the Attorney General, just keep sitting back and going, well, it's an ongoing investigation. I can't get involved until it's over. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's like a football game where your favorite team is up by a couple touchdowns and they're playing prevent defense and not letting the other team into it, or a boxing match where one guy's got much longer arms and the other opponent can't even touch him. The House Republicans cannot allow the Biden administration to do that, not just because of the rule, although that's the mechanical thing that's in their hand,
yes,
but also because they have to use the platform they have in order to highlight the intransigence and I would argue, as you know, the injustice and evil of this administration.
What is happening with the American left in your view? As you mentioned, you're an American historian. It seems to me that they are as brazen as they've ever been in my lifetime about their contempt for our democratic system. They keep talking about our democracy. I don't think that they really have a lot of respect for our constitutional republic, or any for that matter. There's an effort right now to try and remove Donald Trump from the ballot, and yet they're accusing the right of, messing up our elections. What's going on with the American left right now?
Well, two things. The first and most important is that the word democracy to the radical left right now means their power over us, that they get to implement their regime against the power, the authority, the rights of anyone who disagrees with them. But the second thing, just to be an academic for a moment, if you don't mind, the American left exemplified a couple of generations ago best by Senator Moynihan of New York, a thoughtful, certainly left of center statesman, someone Heritage disagreed with at the time but respected immensely. There was a certain legitimacy to that political program, right? Sort of FDR New Dealism. I happen to disagree with all of that on the policy merits, but that was a valid, legitimate, alternative view to the role of the individual or the role of government in an individual's life. Obviously, today, it's not even about that in large part because they've succeeded in so much of their program. It really is about, to your point, destroying political opposition. It has come full circle and now really is probably best described as the totalitarian left because they want you and me and your audience to have no rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when they exploit criminality to disarm law-abiding citizens on a routine basis, they're kind of giving the game away. There's another piece here that I want to talk about, Kevin Roberts. You mentioned Congress, Republicans, what they should be doing with their power. I know they're in the midst of this big budget fight right now, and I keep thinking I'm not hearing enough about defunding the abusive elements of our government. There's a whole range of them. We're talking about the Department of Justice today, plenty of agencies, offices within the Department of Justice who deserve to be defunded. There's also, for instance, the NGOs that we give immense millions of dollars at least to in order to traffic more illegal immigrants into our country on a daily basis. Why are we still funding programs like this? And why aren't Republicans presenting legislation to defund those programs at this pivotal moment?
Well, the short answer, and it's not going to be a surprise to you, is that there is a lack of political courage on Capitol Hill, even among the House Republicans. The majority of them, to be clear, are certainly courageous men and women, but what Heritage has been working on, what I'm literally going to go be working on as soon as I get off the phone with you walking over to the Capitol, is the tenets of a deal that rests upon what you just said, which is let's move forward. Let's get the most conservative package we can get to keep the government open, because if we don't, we're going to get our teeth kicked in. Let's pass a continuing resolution that gets us to early 2024 when we got the political credibility, the leverage to have a conversation about this. But to your point, Vince, the path forward is to pick 2 or 3 or 4 examples from Homeland Security, from Department of Justice, and defund them. Defund the NGOs. Defund a couple of the really troublesome parts of the Department of Justice. Obviously, the point is the plan needs to be bolder than that, but you can't get enough votes to pass it. Let's go have a circumscribed version of this that can be passed right now, and not only for the substance, but also for the messaging to convey to the American people that there actually is hope. There is a plan moving forward. You should not despair about the future because here's the blueprint for it. We need political courage by the Speaker and by the House Republicans to get this done in the next days.
Right. And I'm not living under some illusion that they're going to get 20% spending cuts in the government. The Democrats control the Senate and the White House, obviously. But I do think there are things where there's bipartisan agreement right now. There is meaningful bipartisan agreement that illegal immigration is completely out of control in the country. And a lot of people are feeling that and expressing that all the way to the point that you have Democrat mayors saying it out loud. Now, their solution's different. They want more federal money. But regardless, the problem very much exists. And if you step forward and you say, hey, we're going to stop trafficking more illegal foreign nationals into your city, I think people of all political backgrounds will sign on to that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just think about the rhetoric of New York Mayor Eric Adams, no conservative, right?
Right.
Who sounds like a conservative when he's complaining about illegal immigration. And then the mechanical point is the House Republicans passed that bill on border security, House Resolution 2. Use that language as the basis for funding the government for a few months and then get into 2024 when you got a lot of leverage over the left. Biden will probably be even less popular if in fact, well, he'll be less popular. I won't be too fatalistic in what I think is going to happen to the president in terms of his health and competency. But the point is we'll have a lot of leverage, and that's the fight. That's when we ought to have the fight about these things. In the meantime, we need the courage to get there.
Another piece I want to talk to you about, and that's the deep state. You mentioned the tyrannical, totalitarian left. We got a headline overnight that the Department of Homeland Security has assembled another advisory panel because the government needs more advisory panels. And this panel includes James Clapper and John Brennan, 2 of the most notorious liars in American history, very much have abused their power through the years. They are now joining the Biden administration in an advisory role. First of all, what do you think of that news? And I understand the Heritage Foundation has some plans to try and tackle this deep state problem going into 2025.
Well, what I think about that news is that it's obviously troubling. It's in a really weird, ironic way. It's fitting, right? Because the Biden administration is the island of misfit toys. So those 2 jokers fit in well. What Heritage does, of course, is not just complain about that, and it's legitimate to complain about it, but we put together a plan that isn't just a presidential transition project. It is a plan, Project 2025, to dismantle, to upend, to change forever the administrative state in Washington, D.C. And the beauty of this is almost every conservative group of note in D.C. and around the country is part of this. We have 75 groups who are part of it. It's a very advanced plan with policies and personnel and executive orders to go in, not just in the first 90 days, Vince, but as I like to say, the first minute of the first day for the next conservative president, whoever he or she is. I'm really optimistic that with the right messaging and framing between now and next November, conservatives are going to win. I'm particularly optimistic that if conservatives do, this is the blueprint for government that's actually going to reclaim this great republic.
Lastly, Donald Trump is the big front runner in that race right now. Is it your impression, Kevin Roberts, as a guy who's working on this very important project, that Donald Trump is on board with it?
It's not just my impression. It's my firsthand knowledge that President Trump, Governor DeSantis, Vice President Pence, almost the entire field, with just a couple of minor exceptions of candidates who have no chance of winning, they're all on board. Heritage is agnostic in the presidential race. We want the most conservative of those men or women to be the standard bearer. We've briefed them all. They're big fans. A lot of their messaging reflects it. And so I don't want to sound overconfident, certainly not have any hubris here on behalf of Heritage of the project. but we just know that this is going to be the blueprint regardless of who our nominee and president-elect is.
All right. It's always good to hear from you. Dr. Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation. Nice to talk to you today, sir. Also, you can find him on the Kevin Roberts Show. Excellent show. Thank you, sir.